are you willing to push through that boredom? There's going to need to be a mindset shift there, a resilience to want to change.
Does the goal align with your values?
Set those long-term goals, but implement them in small bits at a time. Be that 1% better every single day.
Hello and welcome to the T2 Fit Talks podcast, where we aim to educate and inspire individuals to achieve their full potential. I'm your host JT, and today in episode 12, we're looking at 3 ways that you can be successful with any goal in 2024. And to do that, I'm joined by T2 Fit's very own Ben Dowling. How are you, sir?
I'm very well, sir. How are you?
I'm very good. I'm very good. It's very nice to have you. Have you on the sofa.
Putting a crease in the couch, should we say?
Let's say that. Yeah. Let's say that. Why not?
We'll run with it.
30 seconds in, if that. Right. How's your morning been?
Yeah, not bad. It's been good. It's productive.
Good.
I didn't have a client this morning. I normally have a client on a Thursday, which means that when I took my son to school, I got the opportunity to get an early run in, which is nice. So I had a couple of, about an hour and a half's breather, I think, between that and coming here.
Very nice.
It was a good run. I got very wet. There's horrible weather out there today. Awful weather.
How far did you run?
Today I ran
like short 10 miles.
No, actually, it was 9 and a bit I ran today. It was a steady 9 and a bit, but it was really hilly. There's plenty of hills around by me. So
you're the only one I know that actually likes running up a hill.
Yeah, I packed up. It was deliberate today. I wanted to pack a lot of that in. But the final hill is a mountain to overcome, I think. Yeah.
Remind me to not do that with you.
No.
So we're looking at 3 ways, obviously, that anyone could be successful with a goal in 2024. And there's a number of avenues, essentially, we could take this down, but we tried to highlight 3 main ones. And the first one that I'm going to kick off with actually is understanding, like, does the goal align with your values? And it might sound like a strange thing to kind of go into, but I think what I mean by that, we are bombarded left, right and centre. And again, social media is something that kind of springs to mind for me. Bombarded with what other people feel like we should be doing or what we should look like and certain ways of doing things. And it's just not always the case. We shouldn't be looking to take on other people's goals, essentially, is what I'm trying to get at. So making sure that it does align with my values, where I want to be, the things that I want to do, and just understanding that I don't need to be taking on someone else's visions, basically. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think one thing that was really important that you touched upon there is social media, and they are your values, they're not somebody else's. So I think that we're in a world now where we are heavily influenced all day long. And I think sometimes it can get lost. I think sometimes we can base our values unrealistically on something that we've seen on social media, something that we look up to, that we respect. And finding your own values is, I think, for the most part, one of the most challenging things. And to sit down and actually write those down and break those down, that they are true to you and they're not carrying any influence from anything from social media, the outside world.
And the thing with it is, I think we can take a lot from social media and from other people, and take motivation from watching someone do something that maybe we'd never do, and we then take that on, and it maybe spurs us on. And I understand that, and that's absolutely fine. But I think the importance of it for me is, if I'm not really tied into it, it doesn't align with where I want to go, it's not going to be something that I'm consistent with, potentially. I think that's really what it boils down to. With any goal, being successful, it is about, one of your favourite words, being consistent.
100%.
So I think that's the main thing that I'm getting to there.
Yeah. And I think it being realistic as well, setting those challenges that are actually something that you can do and you can stick to. Mm-hmm. And again, I'm all for that. Being motivated, being spurred on. I think social media is a brilliant thing for that. They can give that motivation, that inspiration. It's there for you. I think what we don't want to get lost and caught up in is thinking that our values, what we do, has to align with exactly what they do. Mm-hmm. So yeah, making it something realistic for yourself. I think there has to be a moment of clarity where you need to get a pen and paper and sit down. Right, what is important to me, and how does that look?
Yeah, because I know I've tried a number of things in the past, but I also know that nowadays my day or my week doesn't need to look like, okay, I'm up every day at 4:30. I'm in an ice bath by 4:45. doing a morning stretch routine every single day or whatever it is. It doesn't need to be that. But I do need to make sure that over a course of a 7-day window, I'm getting the sessions in that I need to get done, hitting with a decent level of intensity, listen to my body, which I'm trying to do at the moment, and rest and recover where I need to. But also have that little enjoyment element. Like, I might enjoy training, that's fine. But it's my dad's birthday yesterday. Still being able to, have a drink, absolutely fine to still do that. It was my birthday last weekend. I've eaten so many calories and so much sugar. It is what it is. And if I, again, took on board everything that I heard from everyone else on social media, at the moment, everything that I eat should probably be, mooing at some point and served on a wooden plank.
Yeah. I think there's a lack of... It's not realistic, I think, for the most part. It's great what we see on social media, again, like the things that get up in the morning. Obviously, there's that moment where you should probably have water before you hit your caffeine. We're more susceptible or receptive to caffeine at a certain time. Have an ice bath, do some meditation. Whilst all those things are brilliant, and I'm all for them, and I think if we all had the time and the freedom to do so, we would benefit so much more from it. Having, whether it's realistic is questionable. Not everyone's got the time to do that. Family life, you've got a kid running around you. The last thing you're going to be thinking about is finding 10 minutes in a room where you can sit down, do some breath work, or do you know what I mean? But I think there are little things, and I would say that with staying consistent, or should I say successful in 2024, is just trying not to go easy on yourself. Like, take it one step at a time. Introduce those things in small chunks. Set those long-term goals, but implement them in small bits at a time. Be that 1% better every single day. Does that make sense?
It does. And just to kind of reiterate that point you made, all of those things, the ice baths and all the breath work, all that kind of stuff, they can be fantastic. Yeah. They really can be, but it's not something that you have to implement all at once.
Yeah.
Play with it, trial it, see if it does work. But you can do those over a longer period of time. It hasn't got to be something that happens overnight. And if you then don't, fit them all in, then you failed or whatever. Yeah. It's probably not going to be the thing that makes you ultimately successful in the long run. You said about being the 1% better. I think I think even you mentioned this maybe last week, or I heard it somewhere, I can't remember now. We often focus and maybe over-focus on the real small percentage things that ultimately don't matter. Like, if I jump in an ice bath every single morning, but I'm still really rubbish with my nutrition and my the rest of my recovery, or hitting a good level of intensity in the gym, is it going to be ultimately conducive to me being successful? Probably not. It might build a little bit of resiliency here and there, but that's about it. So it's attacking the 90%, shall we say, the consistency, all the boring stuff, getting a good amount of sleep, a good kind of going to bed at a certain time, waking up at a certain time, just hitting a good, structured, well-rounded program, that kind of stuff. Do the 90%, and then you can add the little tweaky 10% fancy bits on top. Yeah,
I agree. And when we look at nutrition as well, I think there's so many avenues you can go down with food that are probably not realistic. Fad diets, all the things that probably will work in the short term, but making the most important thing to think about in any element of introducing something new is look at the bigger picture. It's like, okay, there's some great nutritional strategies out there. Are they going to fit in with my values? Are they going to fit in with my lifestyle? Do they tie together with that? You've got to pick something that's realistic. We could choose a diet that's become very popular and is effective in the short term from a weight loss perspective, if that's your goal. But what you got to ask yourself is that diet going to be something that I can sustain over a prolonged period of time? But there's a lot of bad information out there. There's a lot of great information. I think once it's managed, if you can help guide someone through it, because I think all of those things are great if they are positioned correctly. You can utilize things like fasting quite well, but do I think it's a long-term approach for most? Probably not. But yeah.
And again, you mentioned there that there's a short-term outcome, there's a long-term outcome, or a long-term goal. I guess with that as well, it's, again, when we go back to values, do I want long-term, life-changing kind of habitual things? Or actually, I've got a holiday in 3 months' time. I do need to hit this a bit harder and faster for a short-term thing. And that might also be absolutely fine.
Yeah.
So it might be something that is unrealistic for a short period of time, but I'm also just very aware of that. I know that I have a very set goal in mind, and it is then going to look different to a 12 or an 18-month or a 2-year goal.
Yeah. I think definitely there are moments where we can implement these things that will massively benefit us. But I think it's important to have that backing of somebody that's got the knowledge to say, right, yeah, you've got a holiday in 8 weeks. We can get drastic with it, but understanding that's not going to be forever. That's going to be a short-term thing to get you from point A to point B. But following that, there's going to need to be some sort of sensible reversal to get back on track. Otherwise, I think with those things, because they're so drastic, we become fixated on the things that we enjoy. One thing that I do like to sort of implement, or when we talk about nutrition, how that will look like on a sustainable level to an individual, is trying to apply an 80-20 split to your daily routine of nutrition. I would definitely say that 80% of good quality nutritious foods, whole foods for the most part, but we are human beings, and there are elements of enjoyment that we aren't going to be able to live without. And I would factor that in as a 20%. Don't remove things. They're enjoyment. We're human beings, man. You take those things away from us, we'll have nothing but desperation to return back to it, if not binge on it when we do so, falling off the wagon. But keeping them in moderation over a course of time, I mean, you might even get to the point where you might start to wean yourself off of that kind of habit, that behavior of that thing that you really enjoy, that indulgence. And eventually you might find that thing is playing a smaller part in your life, and it's coming in more at the weekend, because you're able to manage that better through the week. Yeah,
I like that. And again, it just reinforces the idea that if you have those things that you do enjoy, you haven't got to eradicate them completely. Yeah. If that's kind of where you are and that's how you want to live, and then kind of enjoy that journey, if you will. But it's also okay to be on the other side of that. If you do want to be incredibly strict, not drink for 12 months or whatever it is, the bottom line is, as long as it makes sense to you and it aligns with where you are and where you want to be, have at it. Makes complete sense. But to be consistent and to be successful, it has to align with where you want to be.
100%. Yeah. And also be open to those moments where you think, I can do something that's a little bit more drastic. It's for a purpose, but understand I can get back to where I want to be at the end of it.
Yeah, love that. Yeah. Awesome. So the second thing, we kind of touched on it there a little bit, but just to kind of highlight it as a real thing, is understanding your current reality. And this is, I think this is one of the most powerful things. And we actually mentioned this, and we spoke quite deeply about it in one of our summits here. In fact, we covered it on both summits a little bit. Yeah. We went a little bit deeper with it in this one, and that we had most recently in January. And we started to kind of identify this kind of goal setting model, and we use something called a GROW model. Yeah. So GROW basically stands for goal, reality, your options and obstacles along the way, and when, like your time frame essentially.
Okay, yeah.
So the reality element, and it comes down to being a bit more reflective. Yeah. And going, okay, in 6 months' time, I want to run a half marathon, or I'm going to be doing a triathlon. But where am I right now? Yeah. Because often we can obviously hyper fixate on the goal, which makes sense, because it might be a real big change potentially. Yeah. But I'm not actually addressing where I am right now, and then starting to figure out, okay, well, I'm starting here. Ultimately, I want to be here. How do I start to bridge that gap?
Yeah. I think one of the things that I've noticed over the years, just experiences, okay, we've got a long-term goal in mind. That could be a high rocks event, could be a half marathon. If you're not managing that process properly, the tendency is to go, because there's some excitement at the start of that, right? You get that goal, you're like, right, I'm going to buy myself a new kit. But then what's the management of so looking at yourself right now, where am I at right now? Where's my fitness level at? How do I then program to build that up gradually? And for the most part, what I see is everyone goes deep into their training 5 days a week, as much as they can possibly get out, with an unrealistic recovery time period. And 3 weeks in, you've probably overtrained yourself, and that goal is you haven't built yourself up gradually enough, you haven't programmed well enough, your nutrition's probably not in the right spot. I think try to take the foot off the gas a little bit and build yourself up a little more gradually. I'm a runner, I get asked about running a lot, and people who haven't ran or are introducing running or have an event coming up that's running in nature, and they ask me, what should I be running per week? What should my program look like? I think for the first 2 to 3 weeks is just manage what you can, get some short mileage in. And something that still holds true for me, and a guy that I train with very well, incredible marathon runner, is one of the best things to do is just time on feet when you go out. It's not about, well, how does my running structure look? That will come. But I think just spending time doing that thing rather than spending some time, but realistically doing that thing in small chunks, but building that up into a more programmed method, I think works more effectively, if that makes sense.
It does. And again, I think another really important part of that is that ultimately the goal and spending time on the feet is the objective on a weekly basis, but that is going to look different for different people.
Yeah.
So you spending some time on your feet will look different to me spending time on my feet and then to the next person.
100%. Yeah.
So it's very individual.
Yeah. That's where that realism's got to come in. I think I've spoke to a few people in here that have hit running quite hard, and they've gone, right, they don't run, and then all of a sudden they're running. They've done some track work. The first thing that they've introduced themselves into is speed work at the track. And it's not the best place to start, because then you're trying to get ahead of yourself, and that is probably the time when you're really going to start thinking injury time, when things are going to kick in. So I think definitely time on feet is important, how that's programmed, and time on feet is probably more of a broad term that I mean. I'm not just talking about running. I mean time in the gym. Build that time up gradually. Don't overdo it. I think there's a desperate need to work at 1,000,000 miles an hour and not know how to start with your reality. What works for you? Where am I at the moment? What's realistic?
On that kind of reality, I think one of the things that I really tried to highlight in the summit was around just honesty. Yeah. And I think it's actually quite an uncomfortable thing sometimes when we actually have to sit down and reflect and be 100% honest with ourselves. It's a tricky place to be, because it can just, as I said, be very uncomfortable. But to truly have clarity about where we want to be going moving forwards and what that plan may look like for me, honesty is going to be a huge part of that.
Yeah, I agree. I think honesty it's difficult. I think and honesty sometimes, when you say something out loud, it becomes real, right? It's like one of those things where, it's okay. If I keep that quiet, it didn't really happen. Yeah. And that can come down to a lot of stuff. But yeah, like being honest with yourself, very important, very important.
So another part of that grow model comes into the O bit of that, and it is looking at your obstacles. Yeah. So we're essentially prepping ourselves in advance for things that either we know are in our way, or that might come up as best we possibly can. So what I mean by that, I've set out my half marathon plan. I'm looking to spend time on my feet, but actually I know that my day on a Monday or a Tuesday or Wednesday, whatever it is chocker back to back full of meetings, or I can't get to the gym on this day, or I can't go and do my strength work on this day. I can't get out to the track on that day. Yeah. And it's identifying those things nice and early, but then having a plan in place around it. So that's the obstacle. But then the other part of the O is options. What are my options around that? So if I can't actually get that track work in on a Sunday, is there another day that I could do that? Yeah. Or I've got a hectic day on a Tuesday, so I can't train in the afternoon as I would do normally. Do I need to be up a little bit earlier to go and get that done in the morning, or could I go in the evening? And it's just trying to really identify my options to know that actually if things do come up, either things that I know about or maybe things that I don't know about just yet, I'm essentially armed and ready to go for what that plan B might be to allow me to stay on track. Yeah,
I think planning plays a huge role in that, getting in ahead of time. If you know what your schedule is going to look like the following week, or even the week after that, laying out those non-negotiable days where it's like, okay, I've got some free space. So I think there is advanced planning that's only going to... But then we get to there are those times where things get dropped on us at the last minute. They're unavoidable, but mostly we can plan ahead. I think taking some time to get things booked in. Like we'll say here to a new member, book your sessions in advance, get the next 4 weeks booked in so you know what you're doing, look at your diaries, set your schedules. Your non-negotiables now are that investment in yourself. Get that booked in, get that diarised.
Yeah.
And you know what, if you have to do it in the morning, you have to do it in the morning.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I think also different people deal with that whole thing very differently as well. So I'm someone who I know I need structure to what it is that I'm doing. So I know on this day I'm doing this, and on that day I'm doing that. And if I need to get up early, I'll do it because that is the day for that. Yeah. And that's how I know that I'm going to be the most successful and the most consistent. Whereas someone else may go, I've just got 7 days. I've got 7 days. And as long as I get it done within that 7-day window, I'm good to go. And essentially, I guess both ways are really okay.
Yeah.
There's no right or wrong there. It just comes down to what works for me the best.
Yeah.
And I guess the other thing there is, can I effectively recover and hit good quality if I am chopping and changing that around, I guess.
Yeah. I think if you've got the flexibility to do that, I'm the same. Structure is really important for me. Routine is really important as well. But like having some accountability, someone to sit on your shoulder and go, right, you need to be doing this today. Do you know what I mean? Just rather like have that plan laid out so you can get it all booked in and ready to go. I'd rather not go into a week where I'm just like, okay, well, I'm just going to get this done when I can.
Yeah.
I think the likelihood there for sort of achieving a full week of what you need to do is probably a little bit lower.
So do you feel though, because you are someone who kind of preps and plans in advance and you have that routine, that structure, when something does get dropped on you that you really can't then, does it work for you that you have structure in place typically, therefore your brain goes, okay, well, there's a new structure, if you see what I mean, for this week or for this day or for that month? Or is it like, this is carnage, I can't deal with this?
Yeah. You've almost got to have like a backup plan, haven't you? Like something where I do have a backup plan, and it's like where those moments where things are dropped on you at the last minute, because my life is so specific with timing for training. I think where's that availability going to be? And mostly it will come early in the morning. And I mean early, like you know what it's like being in here on a Friday when you've got conditioning, for example, or like there's a day where I'm like, where am I going to get this weight training session in? And I am very specific with my times when I train, but there is a backup plan available. It's painful to do it. It's not fun. It's like that backup plan will come early doors. It will be before work kicks off. And I think because I've done it for a long time, I'm well conditioned in my behaviors and my habits. Like it's a lot easier for me to commit to that backup plan. But I appreciate that these things aren't, like, a lot of people aren't going to be able to do that or aren't going to be motivated enough to do that. But I think having a backup plan is important. Yeah. Lay out your week and think, if something steps on the toes of that, where can I find some availability to get that in?
And you actually mentioned something to me before we kind of sat down for this, and it was this kind of art of staying adaptable and being willing to change in certain circumstances. Yeah. So that will definitely come into that. Yeah. But something that I even now, even though I know that it hasn't got to be this way, I still struggle. If I can't get a certain session in, I feel like I need to get that exact session in elsewhere. Yeah. But actually it could be that I just do something a little bit different that day that is still going to be conducive towards that goal. So it might be that I need to get an upper body session in with flat bench, dips, you name it, whatever. But actually if I could get like a push up or whatever it is, EMOM done at home in a 10-minute window of what I've got, actually that's still going to be quite conducive for me. Yeah.
I think, those available times, those windows of opportunity, the times may change. They may be shorter. So that it might be, yes, your workout's not going to look the same, but what can you fit into 30 minutes versus 60 minutes? With that, I think if we really break down time, I think we can find time. I reckon there are, in those desperate needs for time is there. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
I completely agree.
Because you'll catch yourself at a moment, you'll be like, hang on a minute, I've been scrolling through my phone for 45 minutes. That time could be better spent. I'm pretty sure I read a stat once that we spend 15 hours a week on our phones on average. I'm sure I read that. Whether that's an older stat, how that looks now, I don't know. So the average person about 15 hours a week on the phone. I could be wrong. I'm sure that's a stat I read. And that's a lot of time. And that's just your phone. We haven't started addressing Netflix yet. Or,
Yeah.
do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sorry, hang on a minute.
But again, that comes into being honest and being honest with yourself about where you really are and having that reality where you are right now and going, okay, well, actually, I do have time if I sacrifice X, Y, Z. And you might need to really have those honest conversations with yourself and reflect and then start to put some things in place. But if you're not doing that and your go-to is that, I just don't have time all the time, then, you know, that goal of a half marathon in 6 months' time, you might get round it, but it might look a little bit sketchier than if you were to reflect in the first place and get sorted.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think there's got to be some sacrifices, isn't there? Sacrifices are important. It's a little bit of sacrifice just to manage those times when things aren't that realistic. I think we can find time. Yeah,
agreed. So to round that one up, understanding your current reality is to essentially reflect, be very honest with yourself, think about where you are right now, and ideally, if planning really works for you, highlighting obstacles and then thinking, okay, well, my options around that to give myself a plan B or potentially even a plan C and a D to kind of actually do something that's going to be productive and proactive for me towards that goal, even if it isn't the real specific thing that I need to do. And as you said, being adaptable and willing to change in certain circumstances.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah.
So the third thing I'm going to highlight is actually, I've called it systems versus goals. And the reason I've called it that is I actually heard a quote this morning, funny enough, on social media, and it was from Chris Williamson's podcast. And it was, we will not always rise to meet our goals, but we will fall to the levels of our systems. And I'm not sure if that's word for word, but it was along those lines. And it was actually really hit home for me. And I've never really heard it, I guess, explained that way before. I've been someone who's definitely fixated on goals and just thinking the end result, right, what do I need to do to get there? But not really, I guess, putting a solid plan in place. I'm definitely better with that now. But those systems are so key. And that's key from a training standpoint, I guess from a business standpoint as well, massively. How do we start to, anyone listening to this, how do they start to put a plan in place? What's the first thing they look at?
I think just, you're going to have to assess, I think, and look at your lifestyle and how much of that you're willing to sacrifice and change. And then start to consider what that week is going to look like. Map it out, draw it out, have a rough draft just to kick things off. But I definitely think that there are going to need to be, and I've mentioned it a couple of times in this podcast, definitely sacrifices that, not in their entirety, obviously we need to keep some things in, but we're going to have to make some changes. The things that we enjoy put in moderation. Yeah, agreed. And again, one of the things we really highlighted in the last summit was about just how much someone is willing to do to be successful. Because a lot of the time I think we like the idea of, you know, the limelight and the goal at the end and kind of being successful and achieving something, but actually comes back to the idea of, again, being honest and realistic. We're probably not that open with ourselves going, I'm willing to go and do this, or get rid of this, sacrifice this to go and do those things. Yeah. It's funny how these things like are kind of bouncing back to stuff that we've already talked about, like honesty, and honesty is going to play a huge role in that. Yeah, big time. I think, sorry, go on, carry on. No, it's just being honest with yourself is actually a very challenging thing to do, I think. Very much so. Yeah. And we set one of the tasks actually during the summit around just being very open and honest about where you are right now. And it was nothing they had to share and they had to write some things down, but you could really see it was hard for people to do. And I asked a few people afterwards and they were like, yeah, okay, I would never normally just do this myself. Yeah. Because it is quite either strange, hard if you're not used to doing it, but just genuinely uncomfortable. Yeah. It's not an easy thing to do. But the success that you could have off the back of it, I think, is well worth that bit of kind of uncomfortableness, if you see what I mean. Yeah. I think that willingness to commit is going to be a gradual process over time as well. Mm-hmm. I don't think I'd ever met anybody that's been 100% committed to something in the first instance, and it does, again, breaking it down into those kind of small chunks very gradually, because there is no way you can change all of those years of ingrained habits and behaviours, and it's almost uncontrollable for us to slip into those things as well. We find all of a sudden we're like, oh, I'm doing the thing I shouldn't, or I've told myself I don't want to do. So like honesty with yourself that with stuff, and then also honesty with yourself that try and reassure yourself and not put too much pressure on yourself.
Yeah.
That those things are going to set big challenges, and having that long-term plan to be able to set those smaller goals and targets is going to, instead of, again, like I said earlier, stop hitting things head on. Don't come out of the blocks too quick. Take your time.
Yeah. So someone has essentially, they've sat down, they've reflected, they've been open, honest, they've started to put the first phase in play. They're hitting maybe 2, 3, 4 sessions with the right amount of intensity. You know, they're starting to look at nutrition potentially. They're moving on the right track. They've got a 6-month goal. 2, 3, 4 weeks down the line, 5 weeks, novelty starts wearing off. It starts to get a little bit trickier. What then has to happen for them?
It's difficult. I think in situations like that, again, difficult one to say with any certainty. It's going to be individual. Have we addressed recovery enough? That could be a demotivating factor. Maybe we're under recovered. But what did I read the other day about success? And an individual who is successful is the person that can work through boredom. Mm-hmm. And the person that isn't successful is the one that's challenged by boredom and is demotivated by boredom. But the person who, because we all get bored. And I think boredom is the bit that takes over, and the demotivation and the lack of success comes from that boredom kicking in. But are you willing to push through that boredom? Like, let's take an exercise, for example, that we've programmed for 8 weeks. That exercise within itself might become boring, but we have to keep doing the thing that is boring to get better at it. You don't just keep changing an exercise because you think, oh, I'm getting bored, but then the complaint will come in that I'm not getting stronger. And it's like, well, you have to do something repetitively over time to get stronger. But then you get that brick wall. I'm bored. Maybe it is a moment where you haven't taken a recovery week. They're going to play a huge role in that. Or maybe you're just, I think there's going to need to be a mindset shift there, like a resilience to want to change, and that honesty with yourself to change. And then going back to maybe reassessing those initial goals where you're like, hang on a minute, I'm so much better right now than I ever was back then. Maybe I can just push through this boredom a little bit, because we know it's going to be a little bit of a hill to climb over. It's not going to be a mountain. But also we've got to understand that there's never a point A to a point B that's going to be a straight line. We're going to go through peaks and troughs. It's going to go up where motivation is fantastic. It's going to drop off, and then it's going to probably go down a little bit. Then it will probably level out. But looking at the journey, accepting the fact that we're going to go through those stages, and that boredom is something that we're going to have to overcome, and just accept that it's going to happen. Either that, or what are you going to do? Quit and be back where you were before? Yep. I think sometimes we just have to pull up our pants and crack on.
Yeah, I think if you've potentially prepped and planned for this already, because you probably know that it's going to come in at some point. Yeah. Like, you probably know yourself pretty well by now. You can start to plan for this. Like 4 or 6 weeks in, it's probably going to start to look a bit bleak for me, and that motivation is going to start to drop. Yeah. Like, what things do I need to have in place? Do I need to have like a short 5K booked in so that it can kind of get me to that half marathon in 6 months' time? Yeah. Do I just need to be more reflective on the wins and the progress I've made already? But it gets to that point where, and you mentioned the word motivation. Motivation isn't going to be the thing that kind of gets you to where you want to be. You can't always rely on motivation. Yeah. You can't just have a constant Rocky soundtrack in the background. Exactly. It does come to a point where actually motivation's out the window and it's just discipline. Yeah. It comes back to the fact that I've put a system in place for a reason. Yeah. My week looks like this, or my month looks like this for a reason. Yeah. And it's down to me now to go, well, I just need to turn up. Yeah. I need to turn up, and I need to do whatever I possibly can to be successful. Yeah. Sometimes it is just about showing up. I think we can harp on all day about the best things that we can do in life to get successful. But it could just boil down to just being there, just doing the thing on the day, showing up and getting it done, no matter how difficult it's going to be. And in fact, you do that enough over time, you're going to build up that resilience, that mindset that's going to be rock solid. Do you know what I mean? And then,
I think because we build up these habits and behaviours over the years, and I started at square one. I mean, it was very tough for me to get to where I am now. The fitness level I'm at now, the physique that I've strived to develop for myself and worked so hard on over the years. I think I get comments a lot. You're so lucky to be the way you are. You're so lucky to eat what you eat. And I'm like, if you backtrack over the past 22 years of my training, and you looked at the picture of me going from what I was, I wish I had a picture of what I was at 22. I don't, unfortunately, to what I am now. I went through a lot of stages of learning and challenges, but then it was repetition that got me to where I am now. It was that building up and creating that mindset. And do you know what? I'm driven daily, I think, still by my dad's words in my head. And I've mentioned before he was a military guy, but I don't think he really took well to weedy looking kids. And I was a skinny kid. And there are things that he says that he said to me that have lingered, like in terms of the way I looked. I was a skinny kid. I had skinny legs. He used to call me tin ribs. All of those kind of words. In fact, I should be thankful for, because I think that's a bit lost now, but I think it's important in some respects to have had that for me, because I hear that in my head all the time, and I'm like, it's almost like a constant daily effort to prove him wrong.
Well, and I guess ties into something that you mentioned to me before we actually sat down to do this, and it's around the importance of relationships and building strong relationships and having a network of people around you that are either going to be pushing you on or hold you accountable or something, but having a network around you through those tough times, or being that little kind of lingering word in your ear, can be one of the, I guess, the biggest things in someone being successful, whether it in the gym or just in life.
Yeah, I would definitely say one thing that this is not biased because I work here. It's a completely honest point. Like I've introduced myself into a facility where I can see community spirit, and I can see the strength and the power in that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
And I think you can get motivation from that. I mean, waking up in the morning thinking, the person that I normally get paired up with is going to be in this morning. Do I get out of bed? I think you've got more of a push to get out of bed then. I think having those individuals to egg you on is massively important. I think that's lost in a lot of facilities that I see. You don't get that. That spirit isn't there. Everyone's out for themselves in a gym. In here, everyone's supporting each other. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah.
Sir, we're going to call it there.
All right.
Thank you very much for your
Pleasure.
time. Really appreciate
good,
that.
Man. I've enjoyed that.
Good.
Subtle chat.
There you go.
We came through unscathed. I didn't say anything silly.
This is good.
But then again, how long we got left?
But this is true. You can stay quiet now. That's fine. There you have it. Episode 12 in the books. There are 3 ways, and hopefully a few more things in there, that you can be successful with anything in 2024. Like, subscribe, do the whole thing, and we'll see you again very, very soon.